miscalculations could lead to a war between Iran and the United States. On March 4th, at the conference of the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, the all-powerful Israeli lobby in the US, President Obama warned against, quote-unquote, too much loose talk of war. This was a clear objection to Israel's sharpened rhetoric against Iran in the last few months. In his speech, referring to Theodore Roosevelt's famous quote, Obama advised to, quote-unquote, speak softly but carry a big stick. However, surprisingly, since that day, Obama has expressed his most explicit threats against Iran. In the same conference, he declared that he would, quote-unquote, not hesitate to use force against Iran when necessary, but did not give a red line. However, in subsequent days, Obama made it known that his red line will be crossed if Iran were to decide, quote-unquote, on building bombs. On March 14, President Obama continued his threats at a press conference with David Cameron, the UK Prime Minister. Mr. Obama said, quote, the window for solving this issue diplomatically is shrinking. Tehran must understand that it cannot escape or evade the choice before it, end of quote. More importantly, he said that he had sent, quote, a message that very directly, quote, to the Iranian leadership that it should seize the opportunity of negotiations with 5+1 to avert even worse consequences for Iran in the future, end of quote. Referring to President Obama's ultimatum, Top Knock, one of the most popular news sites in Iran, wrote, quote, apparently, America and its European partners are making every effort to exert utmost pressure on Iran before the upcoming talks. This approach, Top Knock wrote, by itself can bring the negotiations to a deadlock, end of quote. We concur with this assessment and worry that the pressure policy will lead not just to deadlock on negotiations, but to a possible war. Obama's calculation, shared by a broad spectrum of Western policymakers, is based on the assumption that Iran is a rational actor. Specifically, they argue that once the toughened sanctions start threatening the survival of the regime in Tehran, it will bow to pressure. True, the leaders in Tehran are rational, but in the context of Shia culture of resistance, cost and benefit calculations and pragmatism fade in the face of coercion and sense of humiliation. Obama started with the carrot and stick policy of its predecessor, but has gradually moved to a policy of stick only after he was allegedly rebuffed by the supreme leader for a new beginning. Even the original policy was doomed to fail, as in the context of Iranian culture, carrot and stick are applied to donkey. The American approach ignores the immense value and the pervasive role that pride plays in Iran's political domain. In this context, Tehran's reaction to Obama's 2009 unprecedented televised message was predictable. Unfortunately, the overture had been formulated within the same old carrot and stick framework. He praised Iran and offered respectful dialogue, but accused it of supporting terror and building arms. Khamenei immediately attacked Obama, saying they congratulate the Iranian New Year, but at the same time accuse Iran of supporting terrorism and efforts to gain access to nuclear weapons. Our nation hates threat and enticement. End of quote. For at least two reasons, the US pressure policy will not work. First, backing down on the nuclear issue under coercion and language of threat would destroy Khamenei's ruling power, iqtidar, and stature, jaygah, given that he has constantly linked the nuclear program to national dignity, izzat milli. This cultural characteristics that puts national pride ahead of national interest is incomprehensible and completely alien to most Western analysts and policymakers. Second, it is a broadly shared view among the ruling hardliners in Iran that the suspension of the nuclear program under coercion would open the door to more coercion and demand of concession by the US and the eventual fall of the regime. Khamenei maintains that if we, quote-unquote, get intimidated by the bullying of the arrogant powers and make concessions to those powers, these concessions will never come to an end of the quote, until we, quote, compromise Islam and the government of the Islamic Republic, end of quote. It is in this mistrust and non-communication context that the planned meeting between Iran and the 5+1 on April 13 takes a particular significance. A glimpse of hope was raised when the Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan arrived in Tehran on March 28 from Seoul, Korea, where he attended a nuclear security summit and held talks with President Obama. He met Iran's supreme leader, Khamenei, who has the final say on the nuclear dispute, as well as Iran's President Ahmadinejad and other officials. The Washington Post revealed on April 5 that Obama has sent a message to Khamenei through Erdogan, saying the US will accept Iran to enrich uranium on its soil, but first it must prove that it will never build bombs. This important gesture could have helped if President Obama had followed it with a change of tone and abandoning of threat and intimidation policy. Iranians in recent days have highlighted that the outcome of the negotiations could be different if the US would talk in a respectful way and negotiate on an equal basis. The Turks seemed to be interested in mediating the dispute and had offered Istanbul as a venue for the negotiations. However, in subsequent days, disputes between Iran and Turkey regarding the future of Syria has dashed that mediation prospect. Iran supports Assad's regime while Turkey wants it gone. They have been also at odds over the presence of NATO's defense shield radars on Turkish soil. Iran wants Turkey to remove the radars. Iran is now asking for Baghdad as a possible venue, and Mr. Erdogan has said that that will not happen and has characterized Iranian leaders as quote-unquote dishonest. Last May, Turkey and Brazil signed a nuclear swap deal with Iran in Istanbul that was rejected by the US, even though Mr. Obama had urged Mr. Lula, then Brazil's president, to help with the swap. The last round of nuclear negotiations was also held in Istanbul in January 2011, but ended in failure. The coming negotiations, regardless of venue, have only a glimpse of chance for success as long as the Islamic Republic views the US from the prism of its revolution, and the US is not prepared to accommodate its demand for respect and fair treatment. By refusing to accept a perspective change, Tehran and Washington have cornered themselves between regime change and war. The status quo is shaky and unsustainable now that Obama has made time of the essence for a diplomatic resolution to the nuclear dispute with Iran. At the same time, Iran will continue to resist the US pressure approach designed to force Tehran into a negotiated settlement. In the absence of an agreement, it is almost certain that pressure will build and patience will wane, making a military confrontation inevitable. Even if the US were to resist a war, the tightening sanctions, when they start threatening the survival of the Islamic regime, will make Tehran to initiate dangerous retaliatory policies, most likely in the shape of secret operations in Iraq or disruptive operations in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. Such likely moves by Iran will not be ignored by Washington, and any serious American response could lead to an inadvertent or deliberate all-out war. Let's hope that that will not happen. Thank you for watching, and please share this video with friends and colleagues.